Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hi, you are very welcome. This is Reading the Past and I'm Dr. Cat. A few weeks ago, I made a video on the 1518 dancing plague of Strasbourg. Towards the end of that video, I laid out some of the possible explanations for this particular bout of choriomania. And if you didn't watch the video, that was a term that was coined by Paracelsus. One of the suggestions was that this was, in fact, a manufactured crisis that was meant to allow the individuals involved in the dancing to be able to flout the expectations, perhaps even the legal and or ecclesiastical requirements being enforced upon them by their community. However, in the case of Strasbourg, and indeed other locations that appear to have experienced so-called dancing plagues, this interpretation, one of feigned madness, is much disputed. Pretended collective insanity is, though, a much more widely accepted explanation for what reportedly went on in the 13th century town of Gotham. But if you look at this sign, then perhaps like me, it might be understandable that you would at first read it as Gotham. Either way, I think it's time for us to see what we can find out about the history of this place and its people. I think it's fair to say that the place named Gotham will be, for most people, intrinsically connected to the Batman comic universe. Bruce Wayne's alter ego first appeared in 1939. His character would become incredibly popular, and that would ensure that he would feature in his own solo title comic book from the following year. Soon after his very first appearance, the location in which Bill Finger and Bob Kane's creation would do his heroing would get its name, Gotham. Finger is quoted in Jim Steranko's History of Comics as follows. Originally, I was going to call Gotham City Civic City. Then I tried Capital City, then Coast City. Then I flipped through the New York City phone book and spotted the name Gotham Jewelers and said, that's it, Gotham City. We didn't call it New York because we wanted anybody in any city to identify with it. Of course, Gotham is another name for New York. And sure enough, if we turn to the Oxford English Dictionary online and search up the meaning and the use of the noun Gotham or Gotham, then we learn that it has been, quote, transferred, applied to A, Newcastle, B, New York. However, we also see that the connection between Gotham and New York far predates the first use of that name as Batman's home. It traces back to when Washington Irving and his collaborators were producing their satirical periodical Salmagundi. Salmagundi was intended, as one of its contributors explained, quote, to ridicule the follies and foibles of the fashionable world. The edition dated to the 11th of November 1807 includes, as we can see here, a chapter of the chronicles of the renowned and ancient city of Gotham. This chapter takes aim at and mocks the inhabitants of, quote, the thrice renowned and delectable city of Gotham. They are presented as being foolish and overly interested in faddy fashions. But this 1807 example is nowhere near the earliest time that Gotham or Gotham appears in an extant text. Because as we see here, from at least 1500, there were printed texts that included references to the fools of Gotham, the wise men of Gotham, and the madmen of Gotham. The OED online offers the following meaning and use, quote, the name of a village, proverbial for the folly of its inhabitants, wise men of Gotham. There is a village so named in Nottinghamshire, but it is not certain that this was the place alluded to. We also learn in the next century that if you described a single person or a group of people as being from or indeed of Gotham or Gotham, that was a way to name them as a simpleton, as foolish or stupid. There was even the notion of there being a Gotham or Gotham college, and this was, quote, an imaginary institution for the training of simpletons. During the reign of King Henry VIII, in around 1540, a chapbook appeared with the title The Merry Tales of the Madmen of Gotham. Chapbooks are low-cost books that are really more akin to pamphlets. They are made up of a small number of leaves or pages. This chapbook would go through many subsequent editions in the decades and centuries that followed. It contained a collection of humorous anecdotes about the behaviour of the inhabitants of the village of Gotham. One tale has them encircling a cuckoo with a hedge, the intention being they would trap the bird so that she would, quote, sing here all the year. However, as it was only a hedge, the cuckoo soon flew out of the top, leaving the villagers only able to curse after her and to regret not making their hedge taller. There was, we were told, another man who sent his cheeses rolling down a hill. As he did, he commanded they meet him at the marketplace. At that marketplace, he waited for the cheeses all day. He waited so long, it became night, and then he started to curse the cheeses for not doing as he had ordered, for apparently, quote, they knew the way well enough. He did wonder if it might be possible that the, quote, cheeses did run so fast that they run beyond the market. I am sure that they be almost now at York. He hired a horse to ride after to York to seek his cheeses where they were not. But to this day, no man could tell him of his cheeses. The reader of this chapbook also learns about how the men of Gotham decided on one Good Friday that they should take out their remaining salted fish and other fish, so fish that has been caught, perhaps prepared, but certainly is no longer alive. These were fish that they had at their homes for the Lenten fast that had just come to a close. They wanted to cast them into the pond of the village, believing if they did so, then they would, quote, fare like lords next Lent. As a reminder, these fish have all been caught and they were not being kept in water. They are not alive. And so perhaps it's unsurprising that, quote, at the beginning of the next Lent following, the men did draw or drain their pond to have their fish, but there was nothing but a great eel. Now these are just 3 examples out of a chapbook that in some cases contains 20 and in some cases 21 examples. And if there is some way for me to leave an open access version of this chapbook for you to check out, then it will be linked in the description. But the one I read was on Ebo, Early English Books Online, and unfortunately that is behind a paywall. My question is though, why might the village of Gotham, which may be the one in Nottinghamshire in England, have become synonymous with collective imbecility and or madness? Were the villagers as described, or were they instead perhaps manufacturing their symptoms for some reason? And if they were manufacturing the symptoms, what might have inspired them to do that? Well, according to legend, in the early 13th century, King John, who is perhaps often known to history as Bad King John, was apparently set to go through Gotham or Gotham in Nottinghamshire. Here is where the accounts vary. He may just have been passing through on his way to Nottingham, but another version has him scouting for a location either for a new hunting lodge or perhaps even a whole castle. Now, why would any of these options be a problem? Well, if a route is taken by a king during this period, then henceforward that route becomes a king's road. That means that those in the local area are responsible for funding the maintenance of that route, and it therefore becomes a way, potentially, for a greedy king to extort more funds out of a relatively small community. If, on top of this fee for the road, a space for a new hunting lodge or a castle is being sought, then that means that the locals are losing access to the lands on which that castle or lodge is going to be built. Grazing their livestock then becomes more complex. The requirements of hosting a royal party, or even the entire court, puts incredible strain on local resources and therefore endangers the Gothamites' capacity to provide for themselves and for their families. The laws about King's Forest, which of course the land around a hunting lodge or a castle would normally become, and the things that happen when you are seen to be poaching in the King's Forests, becomes particularly punitive. For one or more of these reasons, it is said, the people of Gotham chose to put on a show for the benefit of King John and his party. They behaved in these erratic and nonsensical ways, like those that are described in the merry tales of the madmen of Gotham. The royal party saw these as signs of insanity, and at the time it was believed that insanity might be contagious, and so it said that to avoid being infected by madness, John and his group at once changed their route and also perhaps their longer-term plans, if in fact they had those plans in the first place. Through this legend, the residents of Gotham are, I think, positioned as kind of everyman figures. They appear anti-authoritarian, they are folk heroes, and they are clearly far from being foolish. However, if we go back to where we started this video, and we consider the connection that King John has with the authorities of Nottinghamshire, and specifically I'm talking about the Sheriff of Nottingham, because after all, Gotham is in Nottinghamshire, near to Nottingham, there is, I think, another vigilante that we need to think about, and I am talking about Robin Hood. In Robin Hood, do we perhaps have another precursor for the comic book Avenger of Gotham? The creators, though, do not draw the connection between Robin Hood and Batman, but rather, I think perhaps more logically, with his junior counterpart or sidekick, Robin. Indeed, one of the Boy Wonders co-creators, Jerry Robinson, explains where the Robin name and original costume come from, noting that he, quote, came up with Robin because the adventures of Robin Hood were boyhood favourites of mine. I had been given a Robin Hood book, illustrated by N.C. Wyeth. I think it was a 10th or 12th birthday present. It was a big, very handsome book for the time, very elaborate, because it had full-colour illustrations, maybe a dozen throughout the book. It was the full text, with the full plate tip-ins. I remembered those because I had pored over them so many times as a kid. I had a vision of Robin Hood, just as Wyeth drew him in his costume, and that's what I quickly sketched out when I suggested Robin, which they seemed to like, and then showed them the costume. And if you look at it, it's Wyeth's costume, from my memory, because I didn't have the book to look at. Before I wrap up today, I do just want to point out that this video is a prime example of why I love working on this channel so much, because it allows me to learn something new every week. Because while I was certainly aware there was a town that had reportedly feigned madness to avoid the visit of a king before I started working on this script, I was completely unaware when I started doing my usual surrounding research that I was going to discover the quintessentially English and indeed medieval roots of one of New York's, or perhaps that should be New Gotham's, most famous comic book creations. But what do you think about the legend of Gotham and its incredibly long legacy, about what it has inspired, and what it might teach us about our medieval past and beyond? Please do add your thoughts on this into the comments. And as for an emoji or a social glyph for this episode, shall we maybe find something Batman related? Either way, you can help me to keep the algorithm pixies happy by writing to let me know why you've picked the emoji that you did. Please also check out the description box underneath the video, because there you're going to find links to all the places you can find me on the internet so that we can keep chatting either about this or about starting some new conversations. On screen, you're going to see a reminder of all the buttons to press. So you've got the like, the subscribe, and the bell. And when you hit the bell, please also hit all. And if you find the hype button, give that a prod as well. All of these things will share out my content, but it also, allegedly, might make YouTube tell you when I've next uploaded and when I'm next going live. However, as we know, YouTube is tricksy. So if you do want a failsafe to be notified about my content, please do head over to my website. It will be linked. It is www.katrinamarchant.com. Head over to this contact page and then put your email address in the box you will see on screen. Then please do hit sign up. That's going to add you to my list so I can send you out a weekly email to let you know what I've been up to, but also so I can provide you with links for my upcoming content. I hope you're going to have a great day, whatever you're doing, and I look forward to speaking to you all in my next video. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye for now.